Hook. In November of 1970, a man and his two young daughters went hiking in a remote valley outside Bergen, Norway. The trail led them through a rocky, desolate landscape, a place the locals had long called Isdalen, the Ice Valley. And there, wedged between granite boulders, they found something that would haunt Norwegian investigators for the next half-century: the partially burned body of a woman. No identification. No name. Every label surgically removed from her clothing. And a smell, the unmistakable smell of burned flesh and gasoline, hanging in the freezing November air. She had been erased. Deliberately. Methodically. And to this day, no one knows who she was, or who wanted her forgotten. Background. To understand the Isdal Woman, you first have to understand the landscape, both physical and political, that surrounded her death. Bergen, Norway's second-largest city, sits on the southwestern coast, hemmed in by fjords and mountains. Just outside the city lies a valley called Isdalen, a name that translates roughly to Ice Valley or Death Valley, depending on which local you ask. For centuries, it carried dark folklore, stories of accused witches burned at the stake, of suicides, of a place where the unlucky went to disappear. It was not a place you wandered by accident. And in 1970, Norway was no neutral backwater. It was a NATO member, strategically positioned between the Soviet Union and the North Atlantic. Bergen itself hosted a major naval base. The Cold War wasn't a distant abstraction here, it was geography. Soviet submarines patrolled the Norwegian Sea. Intelligence operatives from both sides of the Iron Curtain moved through Scandinavian cities like ghosts. It was a world of dead drops, cover identities, and plausible deniability. A world where people sometimes vanished and were meant to. The body was discovered on November 29, 1970. By a university professor and his daughters during what should have been an ordinary Sunday hike. The scene was immediately disturbing. The woman lay on her back, arms raised in what forensic experts recognized as a pugilistic pose, a position caused by intense heat contracting the muscles. She had been badly burned, primarily on the front of her body. Around her lay the remnants of a deliberate fire, an empty bottle of liquor, remnants of sleeping pills, and a strong odor of gasoline. A packed lunch, untouched. And jewelry, a watch and a ring, with their serial numbers meticulously filed away. Police arrived quickly. What they found only deepened the strangeness. The woman's fingerprints had been sanded down. Not destroyed entirely, but abraded enough to make standard identification nearly impossible. Every single label, from her clothes, her bags, even a tube of cream, had been removed or scraped away. Whoever this woman was, extraordinary effort had been taken to make sure no one could trace her. Core mystery. The Bergen police launched what would become one of Norway's most intensive investigations. And every new discovery only added another layer of shadow. First, the autopsy. The woman was between 25 and 40 years old. She had dark hair, brown eyes, and was approximately 5'4". She had never given birth. Her dental work was unusual: gold crowns and porcelain fillings done in a style uncommon in Scandinavia, suggesting she came from southern or central Europe, possibly the Mediterranean. Her neck showed signs of a blunt force injury, and her blood contained approximately 50 to 70 sleeping pills, phenobarbital, specifically, along with traces of carbon monoxide in her lungs and petechial hemorrhaging. The official cause of death was listed as a combination of sleeping pill poisoning and carbon monoxide inhalation. But the burn damage, the gasoline, the remote location, nothing about this scene read as simple suicide. Then came the suitcases. 2 days after the body was found, police traced 2 suitcases to a luggage locker at the Bergen train station. Inside, they found a treasure trove of contradictions. There were wigs, dark and light, along with various cosmetics, clothing of different national styles, Norwegian currency, and a pair of non-prescription glasses. There were also several passports and identity documents, all under different names. Belgian, French, Italian. Each one false. Each one meticulously crafted. And buried among the possessions was a notebook containing a series of coded entries, combinations of letters and numbers that appeared to correspond to dates, cities, and locations across Europe. Cryptographers would later determine that the codes referenced specific towns, hotels, and dates. When investigators cross-referenced these entries with hotel registries across Norway, Italy, and Germany, they reconstructed a stunning pattern. The woman had traveled extensively across Europe in the months before her death, checking into hotels under different aliases, never staying long, always paying in cash, and frequently changing her appearance. Hotel staff remembered her. She was polite but guarded, spoke several languages including fluent German and French, and seemed to go to great lengths to avoid being noticed. One receptionist recalled that she insisted on changing rooms multiple times. Another remembered her requesting a room with a view of the entrance, as though she wanted to see who was coming. At the Hotel Horteheimen in Bergen, where she had stayed under one of her aliases just days before her death, a witness reported something chilling. A man had been seen standing outside her room. The woman had appeared visibly distressed. Another witness, a foreign sales representative staying at a different Bergen hotel, told police he had seen her dining with two well-dressed men who spoke in low voices. When investigators pressed him for more details, he suddenly became evasive and left Norway shortly after. The investigation expanded internationally. Interpol was contacted. Norwegian intelligence, the forerunner of today's PST, became quietly involved. And this is where the case begins to drift into a fog that has never lifted. Several investigators, both at the time and in subsequent decades, have voiced the belief that the Isdal Woman was an intelligence operative. The tradecraft was there, the false identities, the coded travel log, the disguises, the deliberate destruction of identifying information, the cash-only transactions, the multilingual fluency. Some theorized she was working for one of the Eastern Bloc intelligence services, perhaps the Stasi, perhaps the KGB, using her travels to monitor NATO naval installations along the Norwegian coast. Others suggested she may have been a double agent, or perhaps an operative who had been burned, discovered, and eliminated. The suicide theory, while officially maintained, has never sat comfortably with the evidence. If she killed herself, why was she found in such a remote, inaccessible location, a place she could not have easily reached alone, especially at night in late November? Why the blunt force trauma to her neck? Why was there no soot deep in her airways, which would indicate she was breathing during the fire? And perhaps most disturbingly, who removed the labels from her belongings? If she did it herself to conceal her identity before suicide, that suggests extraordinary premeditation. But if someone else did it, then someone else was involved in her death. In 2016 and 2017, Norwegian journalists and investigators reopened the case using modern forensic techniques. Isotope analysis of her teeth suggested she had grown up in an area near the French-German border, or possibly in southern Germany. DNA analysis narrowed her likely origin to somewhere in Central or Southeastern Europe. Her dental work was re-examined by international experts, who pointed to techniques common in the former Eastern Bloc. New facial reconstructions were created and circulated internationally. And yet, nothing. No match. No family came forward. No intelligence agency claimed her. One particularly haunting detail emerged during the renewed investigation. When researchers located the original police files, they discovered that key documents were missing. Entire sections of testimony had been removed. The Norwegian intelligence service confirmed they had been involved in the original investigation but refused to elaborate on their role or release classified materials. Someone, it seemed, had curated what the public was allowed to know. Unresolved ending. The Isdal Woman was buried on February 5, 1971, in a